A man exchanges his wife for his cousin, but when he finds out that she won the lottery, he regrets it. In a poor city in the countryside, Marcelo and Laura led a life that, by the eyes of many, seemed painted in shades of contentment and stability. Marcelo, at the age of 35, was a renowned system analyst at a local company, while Laura, 2 years younger, dedicated her days to the children of the elementary school where she taught. The house where they lived, although modest, was filled with memories of a shared decade. Photographs of trips, family dinners, and small moments of everyday joy. However, under the surface of this apparent happiness, a growing anxiety lay in Marcelo's heart. The routine, once comforting, now seemed like a shirt of strength, squeezing him with each passing day. He began to question whether the life he had chosen was really all that the world had to offer. Laura, on the other hand, seemed to navigate life with a lightness that Marcelo envied. His passion for teaching, and the positive impact it had on the lives of his young minds, was evident. She found joy in the little things. A drawing of a student, the flowering of the trees in the backyard of her house, a new recipe for chocolate cake. For Laura, life was full of simple but significant discoveries. On a Thursday afternoon, while Laura was preparing dinner, the tension in the air was palpable. Marcelo, sitting at the kitchen table, was playing distractedly with a spoon, lost in thought. "Is everything all right, love?" Laura asked, with a soft concern in her voice. He raised his gaze, finding her eyes, and forced a smile. "Yes, it is. I'm just tired from work," he lied. Laura approached, placing a loving kiss on his forehead. "I know it's been hard, but we're together in this, remember? Anything that's bothering you, we can face it together." Marcelo accepted, but his heart weighed. He knew it wasn't just the work that bothered him. It was a deep desire for something more, something he himself could not define. And deep down, he feared that this something more could not include Laura. The following weeks were marked by a growing distance between Marcelo and Laura. She, noticing the change, tried to fill the void with small gestures of love and concern. Marcelo, however, felt increasingly imprisoned, his mind constantly wandering away from the life he had built. And it was during a family reunion, an event that Laura was anxiously waiting for, that Marcelo's life took an unexpected turn. Giselle, Laura's cousin, who had moved to the city a few months ago, was among the guests. Marcelo and Giselle had known each other for years, but something that night made him see her under a new light. She was beautiful, vibrant, speaking, and full of life, a burning flame that attracted Marcelo like a light insect. Giselle noticed Marcelo's look, and between banal smiles and conversations, a spark lit up, a silent promise of something more. Marcelo felt alive in a way that he had not remembered a long time ago, an intoxicating sensation that he knew was dangerous, but which he could not and did not want to escape. As the afternoon progressed, Marcelo found himself looking for Giselle's company with a frequency that did not go unnoticed by others. They laughed together, sharing stories and jokes that only they seemed to understand. It was as if suddenly the world around disappeared, leaving only the two in a particular universe. The connection between Marcelo and Giselle was palpable. While they helped each other in the kitchen, exchanging sneaky glances over the sink full of dishes, the space between them seemed charged with an electricity that Marcelo did not dare to recognize. When their hands accidentally touched when passing a crosswalk, the brief, but intense contact sent shivers down Marcelo's spine, a sensation that he could not deny or fully understand. As the night progressed and the house echoed with laughter and lively conversations, Giselle purposefully moved away subtly from the bubble, looking for a refuge on the balcony. There, she found herself alone, immersed in the quiet of the night, observing the starry sky that only the interior can offer. The soft moonlight illuminated her face, reflecting an expression of contemplation and desire. Marcelo, feeling an inexplicable absence, soon noticed her absence among the guests. With a random pretext in mind, he slipped out, approaching Giselle under the veil of chance. Seeing her there, alone, a wave of something he hesitated to call desire invaded him. "It's amazing how the stars seem brighter here, isn't it?" Marcelo commented, his voice breaking the silence between them with the delicacy of an unplanned conversation. Giselle turned surprised, but with a welcoming smile. "It's true, the city never gives us this spectacle, it's liberating in a way." The night was fresh, and Marcelo could feel Giselle's perfume mixing with the night breeze, intoxicating her more than the wine she had drunk. It was there, far from the curious eyes, that Giselle shared dreams and desires, talking about her life in the big city and how she longed for something more authentic, something that she might have found in that small town, or rather, in Marcelo's company. He listened, fascinated, each word expanding the abyss between the life he led and the life he imagined being able to have at that moment. It was then that Giselle, in a moment of boldness, mentioned the only barrier between what that night could mean and the reality that awaited them. "You know, you're a really cool guy. I think we have a lot in common." "It's a shame that..." Giselle hesitated for a moment, feeling a mixture of fear and desire. "What is a shame?" Marcelo asked, eager to know what Giselle was about to reveal. "It's a shame that you're a committed man." Marcelo hesitated, the weight of the truth and the consequences of his next words hanging over him. However, Giselle's proximity, the way the light of the moon drew the outline of her body, drove him beyond reason. I can do something about it," he muttered, the voice carried by a desire for freedom that he himself did not fully understand. Confession hung between them, a dangerous and tempting promise. And at that moment, under the silent witness of the stars, Marcelo's decision began to take shape. It was no longer a matter of if, but of when. That night had changed everything, and the return to life as he knew it seemed now an impossible distance. At that moment, both were immersed in a deep desire, a desire to take the second step, to break barriers. However, the connection between them was soon interrupted when Laura, noticing a suspicious proximity between her husband and her cousin, called them inside with the excuse of offering them dessert. The return to reality was a cold shock to Marcelo. As they entered, the heat and the noise of the party seemed to belong to another world. Marcelo felt as if he were walking in a dream, each step moving him further away from the life he had built by Laura's side and bringing him closer to an uncertain future. Laura, always kind, suggested to Marcelo that it was time to go home, noticing the advanced hours. They then said goodbye to everyone, and when Marcelo said goodbye to Giselle with a hug, a heat ran through his body. The physical contact was brief, but the intensity of the connection resounded deeply in Marcelo, leaving him with a visceral need for more. That night, while Laura slept peacefully by his side, Marcelo lay awake, Giselle's face invading his thoughts. He was on the brink of a decision that could change everything, guided by hidden desires and by the promise of a new passion. But the consequences of this choice Marcello was yet to discover, without imagining that soon he would regret it bitterly. The weeks that followed that family reunion were marked by a silent transformation in Marcello's life. He returned home every day with a weight on his heart, a feeling of being living two parallel lives. On the one hand was his daily existence with Laura, marked by the routine and comfort of a long-term relationship. On the other hand, a world of possibilities that opened up with Giselle, vibrant and full of passion. Each message exchanged between them, each casual encounter, only served to intensify what he felt. Giselle, in turn, seemed equally involved, her conversations always flirting dangerously with the limit of what was acceptable. Laura began to notice a distance in Marcello, an emotional absence that she could not understand. She questioned him gently about his distant state, but Marcello deviated, attributing the change to stress at work. Laura's concern grew, but she struggled to maintain peace, believing that, like all storms, this would also pass. Marcello's decision, however, was already taken. He knew he could not continue living in that state of internal division. Impulsed by the desire to explore what he felt for Giselle, Marcello planned a secret meeting with her. They met in a discreet cafe, far from the familiar looks, where the conversation quickly evolved from trivialities to deeper confessions. "Giselle?" Marcello began, his voice firm, although slightly trembling, denouncing the seriousness of the moment. "About that conversation we had during the party, I was serious. I'm not happy at my wedding. I decided I was going to separate." Giselle's expression was a pure surprise, quickly followed by a glimmer of concern. Although she had feelings for Marcello, the complexity of the situation did not escape her. "Are you sure, Marcello?" She could barely keep her voice firm, highlighting the internal turbulence that her words had caused. "This decision will change everything. Laura is my cousin and she will never forgive me for this. If we decide to move on, if we open our hearts about what we feel for each other and you end your marriage because of me, there will be no way back." Marcello, with a look that mixed determination and a tip of vulnerability, found Giselle's eyes. "I was never so sure about something in my whole life," he confessed, each word loaded with a raw intensity. "You do not leave my head, Giselle. I long for the day when we will no longer need to hide our feelings, when I can simply hold you in my arms, kiss you without fear. I want to build a life by your side, far from all these complications." In the days that followed, Marcello found himself in a crossroads of emotions. He knew that the next step would be the most difficult he had ever taken. The night before talking to Laura was the longest of his life, marked by a distressing insomnia and an internal battle between guilt and desire. Finally, on a cloudy Saturday afternoon, Marcello gathered courage to face Laura. They sat in the living room, a space that had already been the setting of so many happy moments, and Marcello began to speak. His words were careful, but each syllable carried the weight of a farewell. Marcello took a deep breath, gathering courage to verbalize his feelings. "Laura, our marriage, you know?" It seems that over time he began to lose his strength. "It's not your fault, nor mine, it's just that things have changed, and I met someone." He paused, his eyes fixed on the emptiness between them, unable to face her in his eyes. I wasn't looking for that, but it happened. I'm sorry, but I need to be honest with you and with myself. I'm in love with your cousin Giselle, and she's in love with me." Laura remained silent for a moment, absorbing the words as blows. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but it carried a deep sadness. "I already suspected," she admitted. "I noticed how you two exchanged looks when we were together. I wanted to believe that it was just my imagination, that I could trust your loyalty." She looked at Marcelo, her eyes meeting his for the first time since they began to talk. "But I was wrong," she concluded, a lonely tear sliding down her face. "If you think your happiness is with her, I'm not going to arrest you here, but you're making a mistake, Marcelo. I hope one day you'll realize that." The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the muffled sound of the rain outside. Marcelo felt a pinch of pain in his chest, a mixture of guilt and relief for having finally spoken the truth. The decision was made, and Laura's words, although full of pain, also brought a release. With a light heart, Marcelo left the house he had built with Laura, walking towards an uncertain future with Giselle. He did not look back, but the feeling of loss accompanied him. A silent shadow that was now part of his life. After Marcelo's departure, the first months with Giselle seemed like a fairy tale. They shared an indisputable chemistry, and life together flowed effortlessly. Giselle, with her contagious energy and radiant beauty, seemed to be the perfect partner for Marcelo. She introduced him to a vibrant world of parties and social events. A busy nightlife that he had never experienced with Laura. However, with time, the age difference and interests began to weigh on the relationship. Giselle, significantly younger and with a growing career as an influencer, attracted constant praises and attention on social networks. This generated a growing discomfort in Marcelo, whose jealousy began to manifest in discussions and misunderstandings. On the other hand, Laura struggled to rebuild her life with a broken heart. The belief that she would live by Marcelo's side forever, building a family and aging together, had been abruptly destroyed. She tried to stay busy, focusing on work and friendships, but the longing for Marcelo and the shared dreams was a constant pain. On a particularly melancholic day for Laura, while doing the cleaning in her house, she came across something unexpected inside the drawer of the desk. Under layers of paper and forgotten memories, she found a page of a yellowed notebook by the time. On the top of the page, written with Marcelo's worn-out calligraphy, was the following sentence: "Laura, my beautiful wife, always remember that I love you." Next to it, a sequence of numbers seemed to dance on the sheet. These numbers were not mere random notes, they were marks of their life together. They represented the day they met, the date of their marriage, and the anniversaries of both. They were dates that had marked the beginning of a shared journey, full of love and dreams. They were numbers that Marcelo often bet on the lottery. At night, they had imagined together what they would do if they won. They planned trips abroad, buy a new house, a dream car, and finally, they would have enough financial conditions for the planning of a child. But now, all that was left were the numbers. Memories of a happy past that had been undone. Moved by a sudden impulse of sadness and anger, Laura kneaded the paper, throwing it in the trash. However, an inner voice, whispering among the shadows of her doubts and memories, instigated her. Bet. She hesitated, her fixed hand on the kneaded paper that seemed to accuse her of the bottom of the basket. In an almost involuntary gesture, driven more by superstition than by logic, Laura retrieved the paper from the trash and decided to bet on that sequence of numbers loaded with meaning. Marcello, who used to delight with the ritual of making his weekly bets on the lottery, had completely forgotten this habit since Giselle entered his life. The illusion of a new existence next to her, full of adventures, parties and a whirlwind of social activities, had taken him away from the routine he shared with Laura. The bets, as well as many other aspects of his previous life, were left behind, lost in the mist of a passion that began to show itself fleetingly. And it was in an afternoon that seemed like any other, when Marcello and Giselle were sitting on the balcony of the living room, enjoying a rare moment of tranquility and complicity, that the TV showed the lottery draw, a background almost forgotten for the conversations and laughs shared between the two. But their attention immediately returned to the TV when they heard the news. The lucky winner is from the city of Pedreiras, in the interior of São Paulo. The numbers then began to be announced, one by one, each digit echoing in the room as a sign of fate. Marcello, on impulse, began to pay attention, his eyes widening at each revealed number. "Giselle, are you seeing this?" he exclaimed, his voice mixed with disbelief and excitement. The numbers on the screen were exactly the ones he always played, a combination of significant dates and lucky numbers that he already knew by heart. Joy took over the environment instantly. Marcello jumped off the couch, an explosion of laughter and tears, embracing Giselle with force. "We are rich, Giselle," he shouted, rolling her in the air. "My God, I can't believe it, our life will change completely now." Giselle, infected by the euphoria of Marcello, joined the celebration with a free and hopeful laugh. The two danced around the room, allowing themselves to dream of the infinite possibilities that prize would bring. However, the uncountable joy of Marcello was abruptly interrupted by a sudden flash of reality. With his heart beating hard, he ran to the drawer where he kept the bet proofs, a feeling of panic growing in his chest. Frenetically scratching, the terrible truth began to draw. There was no recent proof. That month, in the midst of emotional turbulence and the adaptation to his new life with Giselle, he had forgotten how to play. The revelation struck him like lightning, and disbelief took over his being. He didn't believe he had forgotten how to play. And if he wasn't the winner, then there was only one person who knew those numbers. Laura. She had won. The combination of numbers, so familiar to him, could only have been chosen by her. Marcello felt the floor open under his feet. The fortune that he believed to be within his reach belonged to Laura, the woman he had left. Giselle, noticing the abrupt change in Marcello's mood, approached, the confusion painted on her face. "What happened?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Marcello, with his eyes lost and his voice burdened, revealed the harsh truth. "It wasn't us. It was Laura. She won the lottery, not me." The news came as a shock to both, but for Marcello, it carried an even greater weight. Just a day before the lottery news became clear, he had received a letter from Laura. She had signed the divorce papers, making official the separation he had started. The irony of the situation struck Marcello like a punch in the stomach. The moment his old life with Laura was definitively over, the numbers were sorted as a karma. This understanding awoke in Marcello a whirlwind of repentance. The prize he had dreamed so much was now in Laura's hands, the woman he had left behind. The weight of his choices crushed him, leading him to question everything he had done. Marcelo was consumed by an emotional tumult. The shock of the news gave way to a whirlwind of conflicting feelings. Doubt, repentance, anger and, above all, a overwhelming anxiety. At the height of his frustration, Marcelo turned to Giselle, whose presence until then had been a comfort, and blamed her. "This is all your fault," he exploded, his voice full of accusation. "If it hadn't come into my life, I would be with Laura now, probably celebrating, not here drowning in regret." Giselle, struck by words like a physical blow, retreated, shocked and hurt by the unexpected virulence of Marcelo. "My fault?" she replied, the incredulity echoing in her voice. "Who do you think it is to come and talk to me like that?" The tension between them grew, the air loaded with the gravity of her words. "I can't believe I'm hearing this from you, Marcelo. You are the one who made your choices. You are the one who decided to leave Laura. I didn't force anything." Giselle retreated, anger boiling on the surface. Marcelo, driven by pain and anger, did not hold back. "Ah, but of course, you didn't do anything, did you? You just got in between us, always so available, so tempting." Marcelo spat the words, the jealousy and frustration distorting his perception. He continued, "I'm tired, Giselle. Tired of your meek way and your constant need for approval. Always showing up on social media for men, always seeking attention." Marcelo's words were the drop of water for Giselle. With the patience drained and the heart broken by the implicit betrayal in her accusations, she took a step forward and in a quick move, she slapped her face. "Get out of here. Get out of my life." Taken by a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, Marcelo packed his clothes in a suitcase with sudden movements and left for a hotel, leaving behind the rubble of another failed relationship. In the loneliness of the hotel room, he began to rethink all the actions that led him to that isolated point of his life. The bed next to him, vast and empty, served as a bitter reminder of his loneliness. The darkness seemed to infiltrate his thoughts, each memory of Laura bringing a mixture of longing and despair. That night, he could not blink his eyes, only a storm of regrets. He remembered the plans they had made together, the trips they wanted to make, the new car they dreamed of buying. Now all this could become reality for Laura, but without him. The hours dragged slowly, each tick of the clock, a pungent reminder of his situation. The next day, as the first ray of light shone through the curtains, Marcelo made a decision. Determined to correct at least one of his mistakes, he promised he would try to reconnect with Laura. He spent the day in a state of tension, his work a blur in front of the anxiety that dominated his thoughts. The hours did not pass, each task completed bringing him closer to the moment in which he would face his past. After work, Marcelo saw himself standing in front of Laura's house, his heart beating out of his chest. Anxiety consumed him, mixing with a shy hope that clung to the bottom of his soul. He rehearsed what he would say, the words spinning in his mind, but finding little comfort in the repetition. The house in front of him seemed the same, and yet totally transformed by the absence of her in his life. Marcelo breathed deeply before approaching the door, his steps hesitating on the family path. When he finally rang the bell, a wave of nervousness invaded him, each second of silence increasing his anxiety. He waited a few minutes, but no one left. He rang again, now more insistently. However, The only answer he got was the echo of the doubts in his mind. Marcello tried to call Laura, sent messages, but each unanswered attempt added more weight to his despair. The house, which once was home of so many dreams, now seemed just a monument to what he had lost. It was then that, moved by the despair of finding some clue that gave him hope, Marcello found himself browsing Laura's social networks. There, he found a recent image of her at the international airport. She was alone, but with a smile of someone who had the whole world in front of her. In the photo's caption, it said, "Better alone than badly accompanied, saying goodbye to what was, hugging what will be." Marcello felt a push in his heart. Her image, radiant and ready to embark on a new journey, painfully contrasted with the darkness he now faced in his own life. Now more than ever, Marcello faced the breadth of his loss. Without Laura, without Giselle, and perhaps more painfully without the dignity that had been sacrificed on the altar of his hasty decisions. There was only the image of a man who, in the yearning for something more, ended up losing everything that really mattered. And in the next story, on the day of his wedding anniversary, Raquel Tuner decides to go to her husband's office to surprise him. However, she could never imagine that who would be surprised would be her. Upon arriving at the office, Raquel witnessed her husband having a case with the secretary. Moved by the anger, she devised a plan to take revenge. Click on the next video that will appear on the screen and follow this impressive twist. Thank you for watching. Comment below what you think of this story and which city you are watching us from. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so that together we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories. See you later.